video, I listened to almost this entire audiobook in one day, and it is a very, very dark adult Peter Pan retelling. I feel like I missed out on a lot of the experience of the book. This book scared me, and
you're such a fragile thing, I know.
Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam, and this is all the books that I read in July. July was a pretty good reading month. I was pretty happy with it. I think it was my lowest average rating yet, but I did still read a lot of really good books. I read some 5-star books that I'm really, really happy about, and I read 14 books, so that's never a bad number. So as far as stats go, July definitely slowed down from June. I was doing a lot more traveling that wasn't reader friendly as much, so that definitely cut into some of my reading time, but I still managed to read 14 books, which is not a bad number at all. It's not 21, but it is. I'm very happy with 14. So I'm actually technically still reading one, so these stats, like, this is my 14th book, but the rest of the stats will not include this book. But I'll go ahead and talk about this one first. I am currently reading Book Lovers, and today's Saturday, so it's July 30th, so I have between today and tomorrow to finish it, and I'm like 50 pages in, so I know I will finish it. I'm anticipating this being a 5-star read because it is Emily Henry, and that's what I gave both of her other books, and I really, really like her writing style, so I am anticipating that I will recommend it. But if you are curious to know my thoughts once I finish it, you can check out my Goodreads. That's linked below, and I will have my review posted there. But basically, this book follows our main character, January. And January is an author of romance books, and she is staying in, it's kind of a complicated situation. She's staying in this lake house. It's called a beach house, but right now she's in a lake house. So I don't know if those are the same house or if she's going to rent a beach house later, but it's a lake house. And next door is Augustus, and he is another writer, but he writes like very, what do they call it? Like literary fiction, like the depressing type of literary fiction kind of things. And they are total opposites, but they're both like staying in the same place. And then I think they start this like little competition to, he's gonna write something happy and she's going to like pen the great American novel. So they're basically trying to write like each other so they can both fix their writer's block, and then I'm assuming we get them falling in love from there. That's my assumption. I haven't gotten that far, but I'm anticipating really, really liking it. I've loved everything that I've read by Emily Henry, so I expect this one to be no different. So as far as stats go for the other 13 books, we had 5,494 pages, and then this one's another 400, so we'll have just somewhere around 6,000 pages read this month. Not bad. And then my average rating was a 4.03, and it'll probably go up with this one. So actually, it's right around the same average rating. My average rating is usually right around 4, because I am very generous with my 5-star ratings, and I'm not sorry about that. I reread 2 books this month, and as far as genres go, we had 5 fantasy books, 1 historical, 1 horror, 1 mystery, 3 romance, and 2 sci-fi. Pretty typical of me with the much more fantasy than anything else, but the romance definitely went down this month. I read 6 romances last month. Formats, I read 4 audiobooks this month, which is a lot for me. I think every other month has been either 0 or 1, so July was the month of audiobooks. And 9 physical books. That's on track. I didn't read any ebooks. I don't read ebooks very often. I don't really like reading on a screen. I stare at screens to edit a lot and for other things, so I don't like to read on a screen. My audiences, we had 7 adult books, 1 middle grade, 7 new adult, and 6 young adult. That tracks very similar. Oh wait, that was June. My bad. Back up. Audience for July was 6 adult and 7 young adult. That is actually flipped from most. Normally I read more adult and new adult than young adult for sure, but apparently I read a lot of young adult this month. That might have contributed to it almost being a lower rating than normal. I also read 7 authors that were new to me and 6 that I've read before. And then I had 7, possibly 8 5 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 2 3 stars, and 1 1 star, which might actually be my first 1 star of the year. No, I had one in February. My second 1 star of the year. I don't give those very often, and I always feel really bad when I do. But we didn't have any 4 stars, which 4 stars is usually my most given rating. So that's a little strange. But those are all the stats. So let's get into talking about the books that I read in July. So to start off, I finished my audiobook of The Gilded Cage. I technically started this in June, but just barely. I was maybe an hour into the audiobook, and then I read the rest of it in July. This is the second book in Lynette Nani's Prison Healer series, and I love this series. It is one of my favorite young adult series. I definitely feel like young adult fantasy and young adult novels in general are something that I have been straying away from the older I get, but this is still a very solid young adult read that I feel like young adults and adults can actually enjoy. I really, really liked this one. The first book follows our main character Kiva, and she is a healer in a prison called Zalandov, and she's also a prisoner and has been since she was 7 years old. And suddenly the rebel queen that has been trying to take over, rebel, is brought in, and she is unconscious, and Kiva is told to keep her alive, and the rebel queen is sentenced to the trial by ordeal, which is 4 elemental trials that no one has ever lived through, but if you live through them all, you are set free. And since she's unconscious, obviously she's not going to live through them, so Kiva volunteers to take her place. So it's kind of like Red Queen meets... I mean, it definitely feels like it's got a lot of Red Queen vibes, especially with the elemental magic stuff. It also, like, the trials feel more like Divergent than Hunger Games, but I get a little bit of those vibes with the trial thing. There's a little bit of romance that I really enjoyed. The second book is just as good as the first one, if not better. I actually gave the first one 4 stars the first time I read it, and then on my reread, I was considering bumping it up, but I wasn't sure. But then when I read the second book and gave that one 5 stars, I was like, okay, well, this is just a 5-star series, so I bumped the first one up to 5 stars too. The second book I read was Darling Girl. This is by Liz Michalski, and it is a very, very dark adult Peter Pan retelling. So this follows our main character, Holly. And Holly is the granddaughter of Wendy Darling from the original Peter Pan tale, and her family, like, someone published that book about them, and they became very well known, very influential, very wealthy, and Holly now owns like a very exclusive, very expensive makeup brand. But there was like an accident, and she lost a lot of things years ago. And then there was a second accident that caused her daughter to be in a coma for the last 10 years. And now that daughter has gone missing, and Holly is positive that Peter Pan is behind it. So she is on the hunt for her daughter and on the hunt for Peter Pan. This is very, very dark. Definitely not like a lighthearted fairy tale retelling at all. It is a modern fairy tale, so it's set in our world exclusively. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I liked it. I wanted more from it. I wanted more magic, less modern things. Like, I wanted it to be more of a retelling, less of a influenced by kind of thing, and it wasn't. I also thought Holly was kind of insufferable as a character. I didn't agree with most of her choices that she made. I didn't really feel like she did much other than pace around the house and complain. And I didn't feel like any of the characters were really all that memorable. I did still enjoy it, which is why I went with 3.5. Like, I liked it. I just wished... I wish the reveal had been more magical based and less just creepy based. Not in like a thriller way, just like just creepy in like not a good way. But I did enjoy it. I would still recommend reading it, but don't go into it expecting like magic. Don't go into it expecting this to be really a fantasy. It's really not. It's not to say that there's nothing magical in it at all, but it's definitely not like retelling magic fairy tale type of thing. It's very dark, very modern, lots of science stuff. And definitely check trigger warnings because there's quite a few in here. Next up, I read The Princess Will Save You. I actually buddy read this with someone, and that went really well. I was really glad that I was able to find somebody to read this with, because the first time that I tried to read it, I DNF'd it, and I didn't think I was going to go back. But because I was buddy reading it, I had to finish it, so I did, and I have thoughts. But this book follows a princess, Amarandi, and her father has just died, and since she is a woman, she cannot take the throne unless she marries. So suddenly all of the kings and princes from surrounding lands are all vying for her attention and her hand in marriage, but she is determined not to take any of it because she is in love with her best friend, the stable boy, who is then kidnapped, and she goes to save him. So I gave this book 3 stars, and the biggest reason was that the entire purpose of this book is about Amarandi being like such an independent girl. Like, she is supposed to be, I can rule a kingdom by myself. I don't need a man. I am capable. I know how to rule. I was born for this. My father taught me all the ins and outs and the politics and the strategies, and like, I know how to rule a kingdom on my own. I don't need a man to tell me what to do, kind of thing. Except every single decision she makes is wrong and gets her into trouble. The second a man tries to tell her what to do, she just does it, and that's how she gets into a lot of trouble. She just gives up too easily, like a lot. Like, the second things start to go wrong, she's just like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. Instead of like this like badass female character that I was expecting, that wasn't really what we got. I still liked the story. I liked Luca a lot, and I liked like the concept. I don't like Amarandi. I don't think she's what she says she is, like, at all. And I don't know if that changes throughout the series. I know that there's at least 2 books, and I think a 3rd one is coming out. But I did hear that she doesn't really change much in the 2nd book, so I don't know. I haven't read the 2nd book yet. I do still plan to, but it's not a high priority. There are a lot of other books that I would rather read right now, but I am interested to see where it goes, especially given the ending of this book. The ending of this book actually made me kind of angry, but I'm curious to see, just based on the concept of the whole point of this book is supposed to be her proving that she doesn't need a man to rule. So based on the ending of the 1st book, I would love to know how that concept still stands. Next up, I read The Inheritance Games, and I did love this book. I did give this one 5 stars. This follows our main character, Avery. And Avery she's very smart. She goes to high school, and she has all these plans about all these, like, college and all these things she's gonna do, until suddenly she is told that she has inherited like billions from this man that she has never even met, and she is dragged to his mansion for the reading of the will, where she's left everything, and his entire family is pissed. And now she is stuck in this mansion with his 3 grandsons, I think, who all expected to inherit something and got nothing. And the mansion is filled with like secret puzzles and riddles and tunnels and all of these things, and there's very much something strange going on here, and I cannot wait to read the 2nd one. It is coming in my August TBR, and then the 3rd one also comes out in August. I can't wait to read the rest of the series because this was so good. Next up, I read The Stardust Thief. This is by Chelsea Abdullah, and this follows our main character, Luli, and she is known as the Midnight Merchant. She's an illegal magic trader, and she saves the Sultan's son from, like, basically saves his life, and then she is brought in by the Sultan to go find this magic lamp, and basically the Sultan's goal is to use that lamp to rid the world of all jinn. And she does not want that to happen, but now she is working with one of his other sons and is trying to find this lamp and also trying to double cross him at the same time, kind of thing, and lots of other things are happening. I read this during one of my 24-hour readathons, and I really wish that I hadn't, because I feel like this is one of those books that you need to kind of let marinate a little. Like something that I wish I had taken slower and been able to kind of fully absorb, but because I read it so quickly, I feel like I missed out on a lot of the experience of the book. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I do want to read the second one when it comes out. And I do think that it's good. Like, I liked it. I just wish I had read it slower, and I think that had a lot to do with my lower rating, was because I read it too quickly. But I felt like the first half of the book was very slow, and then the last part of it was too fast, and I got very lost. And I also think part of that was because I was reading it so quickly, and this is not a setting that I am overly familiar with. I haven't read anything else set in Arabia, so there was a lot of things like I was having to look up and things that I didn't know what it meant. And so it wasn't a familiar setting to me, so it took me longer to understand it. And since I was trying to read it within a 24-hour period and also read other things within that 24-hour period, I just flew through it too quickly. But it's still a book that I would highly, highly recommend. It is a great adult fantasy, and I am excited to continue on with the series, and I hope that the second book I take a little bit slower, and I think that is the series I might go back to later to try and reread the first book and try to experience it a little bit differently. Next up, we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I loved this book. I love Emily Henry's writing. I've talked about her a few times, but I was so obsessed with this book. This book follows Nora, and she is a literary agent from New York City. She is very cutthroat, very good at her job, and very much like the very typical New York City person. She sees herself as the ex in the rom-coms. Like, in the Hallmarky type of romance movies, she is that New York City ex that the guy leaves for the small town girl, and that has happened to her multiple times, and she is very bitter about it. But she loves who she is, and she ends up going to this small town with her very pregnant sister because her sister needs to get away from life. So they go to this small town for like a month, and she keeps running into Charlie, who is an editor from New York City, and they know each other, and they have never gotten along, but she keeps bumping into him, and things kind of start to change from there. It was so good. It was so cute. I absolutely loved it. It was funny. It was cute. I loved the dynamics between Nora and Charlie. I loved Nora as a character. I loved Charlie as a character. And I feel like so many romance books, I find either one or both of the main characters to be annoying in some capacity, but I just feel like their banter is so good. And that is one of my favorite things about Emily Henry's books, is just how sarcastic she makes her characters, and I love it. And I loved this book, and I really liked the ending. It wasn't your typical small town romance ending, and I really enjoyed that. Then I read The Ex-Hex, and this was not as good. So this one follows our main character, Vivian, and 9 years ago she had a little whirlwind romance with a guy named Reese, who is very wealthy. His ancestors like founded the town that she lives in, and he's from Wales, so like he's got an accent, and she was all attracted to him, and then he broke it off because he was betrothed to somebody else. She was pissed, and she cursed him because she is a witch, and like literally hexed him. But she didn't really mean it, and she didn't think it actually did anything until 9 years later when he's back and suddenly things start to go very, very wrong. She realizes that her hex very much worked, and she has to figure out how to fix it. So now they have to work together, and things will kind of spiral from there. It's such a cute concept. Like, and it's funny. Like, the book is silly and cute, and it's a fun read. It just doesn't have a lot of substance to it, I felt like. Like, I didn't see the romantic connection at all. Like, I just didn't feel any sort of connection between them personally. So like I enjoyed the experience of reading it. Like, it's very much like watching like a silly little, it reminded me a lot of like Halloween Town, but with romance. Like, it's silly, it's cute, it's funny, but that was about all it was. Like, the actual plot was kind of the romance was not good, but it was still kind of fun. So I gave it 3 stars. If I was just rating the romance, that would definitely be a 1 star, but the book itself was kind of cute and kind of funny, so I went with 3 because I did like reading it. but I didn't love reading it. And if you're reading it as a romance, I probably wouldn't recommend it. But if you're just looking for something like around Halloween time that's kind of silly, kind of cute, and kind of puts you in the mood for the season, this is not a bad idea. And then my next audiobook was The Blood Traitor. This is the third and final book in the Prison Healer series. I already talked about the series, so I don't feel like I need to say much, but I loved this book. It was so good. There was one minute, and if you watched my reading blog, you saw the 1 minute where I was struggling a bit. There was one little plot device that I was like, I hate this plot trope. I legitimately hate that trope, but it didn't last very long. I got through it, and then it was smooth sailing from there. It was such a good ending. There was 1 minute where I thought I was going to throw the book across the room, and I was going to be very angry, but it was okay. It was fine. Life is good, and I would highly recommend this series if you like young adult fantasy, or even if you don't like, if you're not vibing with young adult fantasy anymore, and there are a lot that you're not interested in anymore. I still think this one's a solid contender. The next audiobook I listened to was Illuminae. This is the first book in the Illuminae files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and this follows kind of a lot of people, but the two main characters are Katie and Ezra. And Katie and Ezra have they broke up. They were together, they broke up, and the day that they broke up, their planet that they were living on, they were living in like an illegal mining operation on this planet, Carenza, and the planet was attacked by another mining industry, I think, and they have to flee for their lives. So this book is told like in documents and chat speak, and there's an AI from one of the ships that is speaking a lot and different things like that. So it's told in like a really interesting format. And the audiobook is a full cast. It is incredible, but this is basically the story of their retreat because one of the attacking ships survived and is pursuing them, and they are on 3 different ships that are all kind of broken and they can't jump through hyperspace, so they have to make it to a jump station that is 6 months away. So it's basically the story of the end of that journey, and the other ship is catching up, and there's something wrong with the AI in one of the ships, and Katie and Ezra are on different ships, and a lot of things are happening, but it is so good. I actually only gave this book like 3 or 4 stars when I first read it. This was a reread for me because I physically read it. When I listened to the audio, that changed everything for me. I did have a lot of people tell me that I should listen to the audio and read it at the same time. I tried that and I didn't like it. It was the audio, like it's a full cast, so some of the voices have like accents and stuff, and if I turned the speed up too much, sometimes I had trouble understanding what they were saying, especially with one of the voices is supposed to be like a changed voice, like one of those like voice changer thingies, so it's very low pitched and it was very hard to understand if I sped it up too much. But I can physically read a lot faster than I can listen to something, so I couldn't concentrate on what I was trying to read here while listen at the same, like I couldn't do it. But the audiobook made me give this book 5 stars. I loved the full cast. It was so good. I would highly recommend the series if you like sci-fi at all. Then I read Defending Taylor, and that was not so good. So this book follows Taylor, and she was president of her soccer team, or president of the debate team, the leader of her soccer club, and like 4.0 GPA, gonna go to Yale, like life is perfect. She goes to this wonderful private boarding school. She's basically like the perfect little student, perfect college application type of thing, until one mistake changes basically everything, and she is kicked out of school and has to start over at the public school near her home. And so her life is basically falling apart. She's trying to kind of figure out how to get her life back on track, and she runs into her brother's best friend who she hasn't seen in a while, and his name is Ezra. Oh, that's convenient. His name is also Ezra, and they kind of start talking, and some things have gone wrong in his life too, and things kind of spiral from there. This was my 1-star book for the month, and it's not that it's a bad book per se, I just didn't like it personally. I think if I had read it when I was like, well, so here's the thing, and I feel like this is a reason that I give books 1 stars. Like if I'm gonna give a book 1 star, this is gonna be a major factor to it. It reads like a younger YA. Like the dialogue, the descriptions, like the writing style reads younger, but the content reads older YA. So like there is, and it's mostly fade to black, but there is like sexual content in here that I would not have wanted to read at 13 or 14, but the actual writing style matches ages 13 to 14. So those two things just don't mesh together for me. And that's why I couldn't enjoy it. Like, I can't recommend this to 13 or 14-year-olds because I don't think, at least when I was 13 or 14, I would not have been comfortable with the content of the book. But I can't really recommend it to older YA people either because I don't think the writing style holds up for that age group. But it just wasn't my cup of tea, honestly, and I really didn't understand Taylor's decisions in a lot of things. I thought she was very whiny, and I don't know, I just didn't really see the connection, didn't really care about Ezra, and it's a brother's best friend. Y'all know that's my favorite trope, so if I gave it 1 star, Next up, I read Ross Poldark. This was my Patreon's book club pick for July, and I got a little bit behind because of travel at first, and then I finished most of it in 1 day. It was good. I liked it. I gave it 3.5 stars because I'm not sure that I love it yet, but I'm going to read the second one in August, so we'll see how the rest of the series goes. I definitely went in expecting something different. I don't want to say I expected something like Outlander because I don't think something like Outlander really exists, but I did expect something more like watching a period drama. Like, I was expecting at least like Downton Abbey level, and it didn't quite meet that. And I think part of it is it's a lot older than the things that I normally read. Like, this was written in 1945, which is like 50 years before Outlander was published. So I knew going in that I wasn't going to get the same vibe, but this very much reads like it reminded me a lot of like a Jane Austen novel. Obviously newer than a Jane Austen novel, but the same type of vibe of like lots of parties and lots of like visiting for tea and like just a lot of like upper class British social structure type of things that I was kind of bored with. And I don't know. I mean, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And we'll see how the next book goes. I did like Ross, although I don't understand his obsession with Elizabeth because I think she is insufferable. But, you know, you do you. I loved Amelza, but I did not realize that she's like 13 in the first part of the first book. I mean, obviously she gets older from there, but that was... And I know it's a different time period, but that was still a little weird. And I didn't really care for like all the mind talk. Like, I get the plot behind that, but that was kind of boring. I liked his cousin. I don't remember her name. It starts with a V though. Verity or something. I really liked her, and I really liked her story, especially with Captain Blamey, and I really hope that there's more with that later. Like, I know how that ended in this book. I'm still holding out hope because I was very upset with how that ended. So yeah, I'm interested in the next book. I wouldn't say I love this series yet, but I am interested enough that I plan to read the next book. Alright, the next book that I read I don't actually own yet. So I did read Gemini. I borrowed this from my library for the audiobook. I get all of my audiobooks from the library. I don't buy audiobooks ever. But this is the second book in the Illuminae files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and I love this one. This one was my favorite when I originally read the series. I've never read the third one. I only read the first 2. But this one was my favorite when I physically read them, and it's even more so my favorite now that I have listened to them on audio. I listened to almost this entire audiobook in 1 day, and I never do that. Like, audiobooks in me, I can only listen for a little bit before I need to do something else, but this one I literally listened to like 7 hours straight. But this book is the second book in the series, and it is actually, like, each book follows a different couple, basically, in a different setting. So the first book is Katie and Ezra on the ships going to the Heimdall jump point, and then this book is about Hannah and gosh, I don't remember his name, but they are on the Heimdall jump point, and it is their story, and it's told in the same format with chat speak and documents and AI and different things like that, and they are on the Heimdall jump station. And then the third one, I think, is told from the point of view of two people that are still back on the Carenza planet. I haven't read that one yet, though. But this one is still my favorite because it's the only one that the romance isn't like a second chance romance. Like, they weren't together already and then broke up. The first one they were together, broke up, so this is like a second chance romance. And the third one, I believe, is the same thing. But the second one is not a second chance romance. And I freaking loved it. It's like, at first, in the audio, Hannah annoyed me a little. She's very much like rich party girl. And that didn't come across so much when I was physically reading it, but it came across like she has like the Valley Girl voice in the audio. And at first she really annoyed me, but I ended up really, really liking it still. And that is definitely my favorite of the series so far. So excited. It has been so hard not to read the third one because it's on my August TBR, so I can't read it until at least Monday. And it has been so hard not to because I am so excited now that I'm listening to the audio to finish the series. Alright, and then other than book lovers, which I will finish, the last book that I read in July was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is a horror thriller type of story, and it follows our main character, Maggie. And 25 years ago, Maggie, at 5 or 6 years old, and her parents bought this house, basically like a mansion, and they didn't know why it was priced so low. But 20 days later, they fled, and her dad wrote a book about their story and how the house was haunted and why they left and all of the bad things that happened in this house. And now 25 years later, her dad has died, and she is going back to the house for the first time because she's determined to find out the truth about what happened. She remembers nothing. She doesn't trust what's in the book, and she's determined to find out the truth. This book is really cool because it's told in like dual stories. It's like 2 novels in one, so every other chapter is the book that her father wrote. It's a chapter from that book, and then the alternating chapters are Maggie's point of view in the present time. And it definitely has a lot more horror elements than thriller elements, and I was actually scared. I don't read a lot of horror, and I like to think that I'm desensitized to horror because my husband loves horror movies and he makes me watch them with him all the time. So I like to think that things don't scare me as much as they do, but this book scared me, and that probably tells you all you need to know about me. So, I was also reading it at night, which was a terrible idea, but I did make my husband sit in the same room as me. But, this one it's really cool. I really enjoyed it. I loved the ending. There were so many times that I was like, oh darn, I know what's gonna happen. Like, I know where this is going, and I guessed it, and I'm mad, and then it would flip everything, and I'd be like, oh wait, nope, just kidding. Okay, let's try this again. And I am so happy that I didn't guess the ending. But I would highly, highly recommend this if you like thrillers or horror, because it's a little bit of both, and I thought it was really fun. So that is everything that I read in July. If you are interested in seeing all of the books that I'm going to read in August, spoiler, there are 23 of them. The link to my August TBR game will be below. If you're interested in joining me for August in reading a book with me, my Patreon is linked below with my book club. We have not officially chosen the book yet. The poll is up, and it will be up until August 3rd. So if you want to join, that link will be below as well. And I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!
Oh my love,